Ok. Чакай сега. Забравих нещо. Стой. Така. Hello everyone. Today I'll be talking about game engines, the core features they provide, and I'll be giving some examples, how they're used, mainly examples from FPS games. FPS game stands for first person shooter, if no one knows. Probably you do. Let me take that in my hand. Right. First off, here is what I'll be covering today. We'll be covering hit registration, raycasting, physics, and rendering, which are basically the core components that a game engine consists of. And without further ado, let's get into it. Box colliders, or in other words, the touchy. Box colliders, and colliders in general, are used in game engines for collision detection and physics simulation. They're often used to represent the rough shape of an object so that it can have a physical, so it can have collision in the physics simulations. Colliders are simple. They can be easily created and adjusted, and they are computationally efficient, or in layman's terms, they take very little time and processing power to be computed. I need to figure out where to put that mic, or else I'm going to have to shove it up somewhere. Не, споко. And usually, as you can see on these pictures, colliders are usually enough to simulate simple things like boxes, picklemen, and whatnot. But for some other complex stuff, we can't really use just these simple pills and squares, because there's complex stuff. Like if I needed to represent you, yes, you, with just one shape, it wouldn't work because you are not one shape. So, game engines also provide other ways of fixing that problem. One ways are meshes. What is a mesh, you might be asking? Well, in the case of static geometry, a common method is, as I said, the collision mesh. That is basically just a set of polygons that are connected, creating a lot of complex shapes, which can then be simulated in a physics environment. This method, this approach, is best either for big, large, static environments, like, let's say, the ground, or for objects that don't move themselves, so they don't, have movement by themselves, but you want to simulate them accurately in the environment. But the problem with meshes is that, unlike simple colliders, they're not computationally efficient. It takes a lot more time to compute this than just a box. So and also, meshes are very, very rarely used for things that move. So people and basically anything that can fall. Like my arm would almost never use a mesh, although there are some rare examples of that. For players, especially in FPS games, what is mostly used is actually a set of hitboxes, which basically looks like this or this, where we don't have just one shape representing the player, but a set of many shapes so that we can have a perfect balance between complexity and accuracy. This, as you can see, not that complex, and is also pretty accurate. I just want to note, using boxes is not the only approach, a lot of modern games like Valorant, Overwatch actually use pills which are more curved to better simulate the curvy nature of the human body. Wink, wink. So, then we have the collision hull. Like, I'm 4 slides in and I've only been explaining hitboxes. When am I going to stop? Well, this is the last slide from this part, but what are collision hulls? A lot of FPS games actually use 2 types of hitboxes. The first one is the aforementioned hitboxes, which, again, the set of all these boxes or pills that create the player. But the collision hull is sometimes this big box that encompasses the whole player, which is just one simple shape. While hitboxes are usually used for detecting when a bullet hits, for hit scan weapons, collision hulls are used sometimes for collision to avoid clunky movement when the hitboxes move on the player, and sometimes, like in the case of Team Fortress 2, are used to calculate if an explosion or environmental damage hits. Now that I've explained hitboxes, we can get to the next point, which is... Come on. Raycasts. So, raycasts, or in other words, the pew-pew. What is a raycast? Basically, raycasting is a core game development technique used to simulate the path of a virtual ray down the line in a 3D space. It's commonly used in FPSs to simulate vision and shooting. Here you can see how on this player, when we ray trace in front of him using a lot of raycasts, we can see basically what the player can and cannot see. Raycasting is an essential component in rendering, and now you're going to see a little bit more how it is used on shooting. Basically, raycast is a laser beam shot from one point in a direction that records what it has hit. Other things it might be used for is, as I said, shooting. Shooting in FPS games with hit scan weapons or weapons with bullets is pretty simple. You point the gun, you click, and then you shoot. But what determines if you shot something, we use raycasts. Basically, from the camera, a ray is shot in the direction the person is looking at. And when the shoot button is pressed, a raycast is shot, and if it hits another player, functions like taking damage or applying decals are run, and basically that is how bullets in most games are shot. I need to know, some games consider bullets as projectiles, where they don't hit immediately. But in games like Overwatch, Team Fortress 2, Valorant, hit scan weapons use bullets that hit immediately. Yes, this is that. And now, collisions. Now you might be asking, collisions? Didn't we cover that in the hitbox area? Well, yes, but actually no, because raycasting can also be used for collisions. That is rarely used in FPS games, but is applied in games you might very well know, like Minecraft. Ooh, I said the popular word, laugh. Basically, raycasts are used to detect if anything is in front of you, and if they say something is in front of you, you're not allowed to move in that direction. Here is a representation of collisions using raycasts, and that concludes this part for raycasting and what raycasting is. Now, we go on to physics, or in other words, yeah, I can't really explain that in one word, can I? Game engines... Момент да видя защо така прави тази презентация. Okay. Game engines use algorithms to simulate the behavior of objects in a physical space. Basically, in layman's terms, a physics engine provides physics. That is its main use, and we can see it with a lot of simulations like these ones right here, where a thing rolls down because of gravity and other things collide. Ooh, wow. Also, note here, physics sometimes, most times, can and will have bugs in them, creating some interesting scenarios in a lot of games. Projectiles is what physics are mostly used in FPSs. In a first-person shooter, physics engines are used to simulate the behavior of projectiles, including their trajectory and impact force. These projectiles may include grenades, more grenades, a lot of grenades. Yeah, grenades mostly. But also physics engines are used, physics simulation is used to simulate also gravity, because gravity exists. But you might be asking, Matthew, how does all those pesky physics work? Well, I will explain it to you now. Well, you see, a physics engine runs a physics script, which provides the physics. I know, revolutionary. But what does this physics engine, physics script consist of? Well, there are mainly 5 parts of that script. First off, we need to initialize the script, basically using object-oriented programming to create things like vectors, points, and other things that we will use to represent things in a physical space. That is basically, I forgot to mention, in the physics script, things will increase in difficulty as the steps go. So this is basically the easiest step, the initialization phase of the script. Then we need to make some physics calculations. These vectors we created in the first step, how are they going to apply to an object? What forces are stronger than others? What forces override them? When do they decay? What is gravity? What is velocity? What is force? What is weight? All of those things need to be coded and fine-tuned so that we have a great physics engine. But you might be asking, we forgot one thing. Well, you see, when we have 2 boxes, they don't just pass through each other in the real world. So we need collisions. And this is where, I don't want to use bad language, but this is where things get difficult. First off, we need to have collision detection. And as I said in the first part, this is mainly used with raycasts and hitboxes. As you can see, planning the previous 2 parts combined in the third. What revolutionary presentation skills. Anyway, so this is its own confusing process because it's not really that easy to determine when 2 things collide. It's a messy process, but it's not the hardest. Then it becomes hard. Because after that, we need to simulate the forces that are applied after the collision, which is where everything... How am I not going to use... Fan hits the shoes. Yeah, okay. This is where everything gets... I don't want to swear, but I need to swear. Okay, this is where everything goes to hell. Yeah, to bananas. Everything goes to bananas. Because the collision response needs to be so well coded and so well finely tuned because in the real world, there are no edge cases because everything is an edge case. Every single little speck of difference is going to produce different results. And if you're not ready to watch every single part of it, you're going to have 1,000 bugs in the end because you're going to have something clip into something else, then something flies because 2 things clipping, and You can ask other programmers of physics engines why this part is basically the hardest. And now for the most annoying part, integration with the game logic, where a lot of bad game engines just don't have it, and a lot of good game engines have it but bad. Because integration with the game logic comes with its own bugs and features, and by bugs and features I mean 1,000 of those. Because it's cool and all that you have a physics simulation, but how are you going to see it? And that's where we're headed next. Rendering, or in other words, watching. Anyway, rendering is basically the process of getting a 3D environment and turning it into something that we can see. Images, animations, everything you see has been rendered. You know, if it's not in the real world, real world. So, basically, how does rendering work? Rendering, again, consists usually of 5 parts. The first part is geometry processing. Hey, yeah, remember that last thing we did in the last part, the physics simulation thing? Yeah, we need to take everything from that and process it into visual data. That is hard, stupid hard. But things like Unity and Unreal Engine already have those integrated because, yeah, you're not really creating your own rendering engine when you code games. Anyway, so geometry processing is basically taking those values we had earlier and turning them into images. Then we need to light things, which is basically the bane of all game developers because baking lights is hard and stupid. Anyway, making lights bad. Then we go on to texturing. I know some people are into modern art, see a blank white canvas and say, "Oh God, such excellence." Well, yeah, that wouldn't work for games, would it? You don't want your game looking all white, like someone smeared white paint all over it, or something else. Anyway, basically, texturing is when we take all that white stuff and make it not white. This is where most designers come in, so that they can create the textures for all of these white objects to turn them into not white objects. You know, because it wouldn't really make sense for a stone to have a tree texture and vice versa. Anyway, then we need shadowing. Shadowing is the process of taking the lights we set up and making shadows out of them. This is its own painstakingly long process, which I'm not gonna delve into too much because it pains me. Shadows are important, but yeah, it's sad how much work goes into these things. And finally, post-processing, which is basically fine-tuning the product we already have to have a better image. It can go to upping up the exposure, upping up the contrast, adding some filters, increasing the brightness, decreasing the brightness, and usually this step is really not hard, not finicky, but just you never know when it's the best. You never know when you can do better. It's just you get lost. It's I don't know. It's honestly sad how much goes into rendering. Anyway, with all that all then said, come on, we're going on to honorable mentions. As you can see, if you were paying attention to the content, we've reached the finale. Why are you repeating? Stop repeating. No. Bad. Okay. Anyway, we've reached the end. Right, we're gonna have that in the background from now on. That is not fun. Right. So we covered hitboxes, raycasts, rendering, and physics engines. Not in that order. Please, please stop. Please, okay. We covered all those things. Now on to some quality of life additions to most physics engines. First of all, we have level builders. Please, a standing ovation for level builders, which make the lives of a lot of designers so much easier. Because without these guys, you'll need to manually edit cubes. And manually editing cubes is not fun because cubes, no matter what you do to them, are still cubes. I'll give you an example. Without level editors, to create a room like this, just a room with 6 walls, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, we're going to need 6 cubes or 6 planes to cover the whole perimeter. Meanwhile, with level builders, we can just say, hey, you like this cube? Well, put a smaller cube into it and then delete the parts that are overlapping. And then you get a level. How cool is that? Anyway, second honorable mention are animators. What is an animator? Basically, you change something and you record that change. And when you play the animation, that change happens again without you doing it. This is very important because unless you're the developer of the game, you can't really change things in the game when you're playing the game. So you need an animator to animate things in the usual meaning of animation, like running, jumping of your character, but also things like switching on and off of lighting and other things that can be dynamically done in the games. And finally, but not the least important, Unity's particle system. You all know it, you all love it. Particle systems is basically, I hit the wall here, and some particles start spewing out because I hit it. It's nice, it's beautiful, it's cool, it's cool, it's cool. So yeah, these are all the honorable mentions, and with that, thank you for listening to me, and thanks. I forgot the sound. Oh, that's sad. We're gonna do it again. Yay. Thanks for listening to my TED Talk, TM. Why are you going blank? Okay, that works, that works. Shut it down. Thank you, thank you. There it is. Any questions? While we stare at this gaping mouth of this yellow person, who might it be? Is it Trump? Might be Trump. Yes?
Can you tell us more about Unity's particle system?
Yes, I can. I can show you, but it's gonna take around 5 minutes because this computer has the processing power of a potato, and Unity and other physics engines at that don't like computers that are run on potatoes. So without that, I'll show you. Unity's particle system is cool and good because there's a lot of customization you can do. Basically, you can tell it when to start, when to stop, how many particles, what way are they going, is there gravity, is there not, is there a gravitational orb? You can tell them to circle around the object that is producing them. It's really, there's a lot of customization you can do with Unity's particle system. You can add your own particles with their own PNGs. Yes? Oh yeah, just play Danny's. Yeah, just play Danny's video on every time he says Unity's particle system. While we're doing that, any more questions? Questions? No one? Anybody? Exactly. So yeah, you can see here my YouTube feed. Nice. There's Danny. Danny is one very popular Unity game developer who gained his popularity through his comedy and increase the volume.
Simulator explosive. So I made an explosion effect using the Unity particle system.
Unity's particle system.
Let's test it out. It's big smoke. So I made some smoke with the Unity particle system and put it into the game there, and also made some bullet explosion using Unity's particle. And here you can see the new shooting in action. It looks cool. And I achieved this effect using a particle system in front of the player.
Unity's particle system.
Unity's particle system, I made an explosion effect, which, if I may say so, a very good idea. And then I made some particles using Unity's particle system. Now, the Unity particle system is actually anything with it. Next week, I'm actually planning on curing my crypto.
Unity's particle system, everybody.
So stay tuned for that. Might even make a tutorial about it on my tutorial chat. Be bad because the gun does not move at all. So I created a missile
Абе ти верно ли затвори Unity? Човек, зареждаше се. За да покажа действие.
Не, за това имаш.
Имаш Дани.
Това друго не ти трябва.
Да, момент само да позирам. Аре бе.
What's up, guys?
Къде е мишката? Oh, this is falling apart like a house of cards, isn't it?
Стига дълго, Матио.
Right, so...
Спирам.
Okay. Да, добре.